The chamber lights pulsed in slow intervals, breathing like some vast mechanical lung, and she stood in the middle of it all as though the heartbeat of the ship itself bent to her command. Lyra Vey, commander of the human strike, cruiser Resolute, the woman who had never surrendered, never faltered, never allowed herself to be less than absolute in control. Her crew whispered that she was iron wrapped in silk, dangerous in a way that no alien had ever quite understood, and the galaxy itself seemed to tilt when she walked into a room. She knew the feeling of power, the exact weight of command balanced on her shoulders, and she carried it with the ease of someone born to bend the universe to her will. But deep inside, behind that steady voice and steel gaze, she carried something else, a memory that whispered like a knife in the dark. A memory of the last time she had lost control. The hum of the warships steadied her. Humanity had been fighting the Kethri Dominion for nearly 2 decades, and every battle was a test of endurance. The Kethri were brutal, 6-limbed predators with claws that could rip through armor and minds sharpened by centuries of conquest. They enslaved, consumed, erased. Humanity had been expected to break, but humanity hadn't. Humanity bled, adapted, and invented faster than their enemy could comprehend. And commanders like Lyra were the reason why the Dominion now whispered in fear of the words humans spoke with such defiance. We die standing. She stood at the tactical table, hands hovering over the glowing projections, eyes fixed on the scarlet swarm of Ketheri's signatures massing on the far side of Epsilon Gate. It wasn't supposed to be possible. They had broken the Dominion's fleets here 2 years ago, sealed the gate with fire and sacrifice, and yet the readings were undeniable. A massive fleet gathering, preparing to cross. Her crew murmured updates, none daring to raise their voice above hers. And then came the voice that sliced through the command deck, soft, controlled, and strangely amused. They're coming for you, Lyra. Just for you. Her breath hitched, so slight that none noticed, but inside it was a blade dragged over old scar tissue. The voice didn't belong to anyone present. It came from the implant buried deep in her skull, a secret she had never told anyone. Long ago, during the disastrous raid on Calveros Prime, she had been captured by the Dominion. For 72 hours, she had been their experiment, their broken toy, their attempt to shatter a human commander from the inside out. She hadn't spoken of it since. She hadn't needed to. She had escaped, she had killed them all, she had come back stronger. But they had left something behind, something that spoke in her mind when the universe turned darkest. Sometimes whispering warnings, sometimes taunting, always there. And now it was back. Her knuckles whitened against the edge of the table as she forced her voice steady. Signal intelligence. Confirm the fleet composition. A lieutenant's voice trembled as he replied, Yes, Commander. Reading over 1,000 Dominion warforms, at least 4 hive ships. That's nearly a third of their remaining forces, ma'am. The crew gasped, but Lyra didn't flinch. She couldn't. Then this is where they break. Or we do. And the voice in her skull laughed, low and intimate, as though lips brushed her ear. Oh, Lyra, you love pretending you're in control. But you remember, don't you? How quickly it can be taken away. Her eyes flickered shut for a heartbeat, and she was there again, bound in silver restraints on the Dominion's laboratory slab, alien hands tracing the fragile skin of her throat, their whispers promising to peel her apart until no defiance remained. She remembered the sharp scent of her own blood, the cold press of instruments against her chest, and her own voice screaming in a silence no one else would ever hear. But she had endured. She had survived. And when the opportunity came, she had torn the restraints free, stolen their weapons, and left a massacre in her wake. She had promised herself never again, never to be powerless, never to surrender control. Her eyes opened like steel slamming shut. All ships, prepare for engagement. We hold them at the gate. The crew erupted into motion. Orders relayed, weapons primed, engines screamed alive. The Resolute trembled as plasma batteries charged. Yet even as the ship roared toward war, Lyra's mind burned with the voice whispering, You can't hold forever. And when you fall, oh, when you fall, hours blurred into the chaos of battle. Human ships darted between Dominion leviathans, small and fragile, but burning with ferocity. The void filled with fire and screams. The Resolute plunged deep into the swarm, her guns shredding war forms into clouds of molten debris. Lyra commanded like a goddess of war, her words carrying calm precision even as death raged around them. Her crew followed her without question, because she made them believe control was absolute. But then the moment came. A Dominion boarding pod pierced their shields, slammed into the hull, and tore open with screeches of alien metal. Sirens wailed through the decks. The voice in her skull purred. "This is it, Lyra. Time to see what happens when you're no longer in control." She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her sidearm, barked orders to seal bulkheads, and led the counterstrike herself. Her boots thundered down the corridor as her soldiers rallied behind her. The first wave of Ketheri poured through the smoke, towering, blade-limbed, their eyes burning with hunger. Gunfire lit the darkness, screams ripped the air, and Lyra fought like the ghost of Calvero's prime all over again. Every shot precise, every movement sharp. But no matter how many fell, more came, and the corridors choked with blood and fire. Then she saw him, a Ketheri commander, massive even by their standards, cloaked in chitinous armor that shimmered like liquid metal. His gaze locked on her across the carnage, and he smiled, or whatever passed for a smile on that monstrous face. His voice, impossibly, echoed in her skull just like the whispers had. "You belong to us still, Lyra Vey. You only think you escaped." For the first time in years, fear flared hot in her chest. This wasn't just another enemy. This was the architect of her captivity, the one she thought she had killed on Calvero's prime. Yet here he stood, impossibly alive, impossibly close, reaching toward her with those terrible hands. And as her finger tightened on the trigger, the ship shuddered, the deck buckled, and the world dissolved into fire and darkness. The firestorm hurled her into darkness, her body slamming hard against the bulkhead. Her ears rang with the shriek of tearing metal and the groan of a dying ship. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even remember which way was up. Then instinct cut through the haze. She dragged herself upright, coughing smoke from her lungs, her fingers slick with blood that she couldn't tell was hers or someone else's. Alarms blared. The red emergency lights stuttered, and somewhere in the distance men and women screamed. The Resolute had been gutted. Her hand tightened on the sidearm even as her vision swam. Through the smoke she saw movement, massive, deliberate. The Ketheri commander stepped through the flames as though they parted for him, his chitin glistening with molten fire. His presence consumed the corridor, larger than life, impossibly real. She whispered the name she hadn't dared speak in a decade. Zeker. The alien's head tilted, his 6 eyes glittering. His voice poured into her skull, not through sound but through the invasive residue they had left in her when she was their captive. "Yes, little human. You remember. You survived what no other could. That makes you ours forever." Rage flared hot enough to cut through the fear. She raised the pistol and fired. Plasma bolts seared through the smoke, striking his armored chest, staggering him but not stopping him. He laughed, the sound vibrating in her bones. "Still fighting. Still pretending you command this dance. But tell me, when your ship burns, when your crew dies screaming, when your body trembles like it did in my chamber, who will you be then?" Her soldiers surged into the corridor behind her, weapons blazing, shouts rising over the chaos. For a heartbeat, she believed they could do it, believed they could cut this monster down. But Zeker moved like liquid shadow, blades unfolding from his limbs, cleaving men apart as though they were paper. The floor became a river of blood and metal. She fought at the center, her mind split between precise commands and raw survival, until the air filled with smoke so thick it suffocated thought. Then came the explosion. Bulkheads tore open, the hull venting atmosphere in a violent scream. The world became claws of suction and silence, her body wrenched toward the void. She grabbed a railing, teeth bared against the pole, her soldiers screaming as they were dragged out into nothingness. Through it all, Zeker's gaze never left hers. He gripped the torn metal with monstrous claws, unyielding against the storm. You can't hold, Lyra. Not forever. The emergency shutters slammed down, sealing the breach. The silence afterward was deafening. The survivors staggered, bleeding, choking on smoke. Lyra's lungs burned. Her eyes locked on the alien commander, but the smoke thickened, and when it cleared, he was gone. She knew then this wasn't just a battle. This was a hunt. He was inside her ship. She staggered back to command, her boots leaving streaks of blood on the deck. The bridge was chaos. Officers shouted over broken systems. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the tactical display pulsed with too many red signatures to count. They were surrounded, overwhelmed. And yet every eye turned to her, waiting for orders, waiting for control. She forced her voice steady. We seal the inner decks. We purge the corridors. And we find him. Her XO hesitated, his face pale. Ma'am, if what you saw is real. She cut him off, her tone a blade. It's real. He's here. And if we don't stop him, this ship is already lost. The voice in her skull whispered, Oh, Lyra, you sound so sure. But you remember what it felt like, don't you? The moment your body stopped being yours? The moment you realized you had no control at all? Her jaw tightened, but the memory surged regardless. The cold metal restraints, the invasive probes pressing against her skin, the way her own heartbeat had betrayed her fear. And the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the intimacy of it, the way they had broken into her body and mind as though both were theirs to play with. She had fought, but they had peeled back her defenses like silk. She had sworn never to let it happen again. Now Zeker was here, inside her ship, and she felt the tremor of that same violation rippling through her veins. Ma'am, the XO's voice yanked her back. The Dominion fleet. If we don't retreat, they'll crush us. Her fists clenched. Retreat meant letting him win. Retreat meant admitting she wasn't in control. And Lyra Vey did not retreat. No, she said, her voice cold iron. We fight. We hold the gate until the last. The crew obeyed. They always did, because she made them believe control was never in question. But deep inside, as the voice in her skull purred and the ship trembled under enemy fire, she knew control was already slipping like sand through her fingers. Hours bled together. Battles raged on every deck, the Dominion pressing harder, the Resolute groaning under the strain. Lyra moved like a phantom, appearing wherever the fight was fiercest, her presence igniting her soldiers' will. She was untouchable, unstoppable, everything the crew needed her to be. And yet each corridor she cleared, each enemy she cut down, felt like moving deeper into a trap. Zeker was always just ahead, just beyond reach, taunting her with glimpses and whispers. He wanted her to follow. He wanted her alone. Finally, in the shattered ruins of engineering, she found him. The heart of her ship burned around them, flames licking the bulkheads, coolant flooding the floor. He stood at the center, unmarked, unyielding, his 6 eyes gleaming with hunger. She raised her weapon. He spread his arms as though inviting her closer. Here we are, little commander. Just you and me. No crew to hide behind. No ship to pretend you control. Just the truth. Do you want to feel it again? That moment when power slipped away and you were mine? Her breath caught, rage and fear colliding inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to shoot, to prove him wrong. But her body trembled despite her will, her grip tightening too hard on the weapon. And then, as though sensing her hesitation, the deck beneath her feet gave way with a deafening crack. The world fell out from under her. The floor disintegrated beneath her boots, metal shrieking as she plunged into fire and shadow. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, her body slamming against twisted beams before crashing into the lower deck. Pain flared bright in her ribs and shoulder, but training forced her back to her knees before the smoke could smother her. She clutched her sidearm tighter, the weapon trembling in her blood-slick hand, and forced her eyes to focus through the haze. She had landed in the auxiliary core chamber, a hollow, cavernous space riddled with exposed conduits and half-dead machinery. The hum of power was faint, failing, like a heartbeat struggling its last. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and coolant leaked across the floor in pools that shimmered like mirrors. The reflections shifted, distorted, as though something moved beneath the surface. And then his voice, not whispered in her skull, but echoing through the chamber itself, deep and resonant. You fall and still you rise. That is why I wanted you. Why I took you. Why I will take you again. She spun, weapon raised, teeth bared. Show yourself, coward. The air trembled. He emerged from the smoke as if the shadows themselves had given him shape. Towering, inhuman, his carapace glistening black-blue, his limbs unfolding with a predatory grace that mocked gravity itself. Zeker. His presence filled the chamber, devouring space, devouring light. Her breath caught despite her will. The voice in her skull melted into his, no longer separate, no longer distant. The parasite they had left in her, the whisper that had taunted her for years, was him. Always him. You carried me inside you all this time, he said, his steps echoing like war drums. Every command you gave, every victory you claimed, I was there, watching, waiting. Do you understand now? You never escaped me. You never had control. Her stomach turned as the truth slammed into her. The voice had never been hers, never just a scar. It was his mark inside her. She wanted to deny it, to scream, but her voice came out ragged, trembling. I killed you. The alien tilted his head, mockery curling through his stance. You tried. You failed. And while you clung to your illusion of freedom, I lived in your veins, in your thoughts, in the softest part of you. You thought you commanded men, ships, fleets? No, you commanded nothing. You were mine all along. She fired. Plasma bolts seared across the chamber, cutting through smoke, striking his body with explosions of burning light. He staggered, shrieked, but did not fall. He surged forward, closing the distance in a blur of speed no human reflex could match. She ducked, rolled, fired again, her body screaming with pain and exhaustion, but still she fought. She had always fought. Claws ripped through the air inches from her throat. She lashed out with her boot, striking his knee joint, buying a heartbeat. He struck back, and the force hurled her across the chamber into a sparking conduit. Agony burned through her spine, but she forced herself upright, spitting blood. He approached, slower now, savoring it. You can't win, Lyra. You can't even breathe without me inside you. Every beat of your heart belongs to me. I don't need to kill you. I just need to remind you. The coolant hissed at their feet, thick mist rising as heat met liquid. For a moment she saw herself reflected in the pool, pale, broken, weapon clutched like a talisman, and behind her, the monstrous silhouette that had haunted her nightmares. The sight cracked something inside her. A memory surged unbidden, raw, and unbearable. The chamber on Calvero's prime, the restraints cutting into her wrists, the cold press of instruments against her skin, and his hands, alien, merciless, intimate, tracing lines down her flesh as though she were both experiment and possession. She had sworn never to feel that again, but the memory wrapped around her throat like chains. Her weapon shook. Her body betrayed her. Zeker closed the last steps and caught her wrist in his claw. The plasma pistol hissed in his grip, its barrel warping under pressure until it shattered, useless. He leaned close, his face filling her vision, his voice vibrating through her bones. Now, little human, tell me, who is in control? She snarled, fighting, twisting, but his strength was a mountain against her storm. For the first time since Calvero's prime, her breath hitched with the terror of helplessness. And he felt it. His grip tightened, just enough to remind her of what power meant. But even as her pulse screamed betrayal, something else rose inside her, a defiance so sharp it felt like fire. She spat blood into his face. Not you. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered in his alien eyes. Then rage followed, hot and violent. He slammed her against the wall, the impact rattling her teeth, his claws pinning her throat. She clawed at his grip, desperate for air, her vision sparking with stars. His laughter filled the chamber, the sound of inevitability. And yet, Beneath the roar of his voice and the hammer of her heartbeat, there was another sound. A low, rising hum. The auxiliary core was overloading. Her fall had damaged it. Her shots had destabilized it. And now the entire chamber was seconds away from tearing itself apart. His gaze shifted, briefly, to the flickering conduits and the rising hum. She saw it, the distraction, the crack in his certainty. And though her body screamed weakness, her mind snapped sharp. She wasn't done yet. With the last of her strength, she slammed her knee into the coolant pipe beside them. It burst open with a shriek, flooding the chamber with superheated mist. The hiss drowned his laughter. The sudden cloud blinded them both. She tore free, choking, stumbling toward the shadows, her lungs burning. His roar shook the chamber, furious and primal, but for the first time, he had lost sight of her. And then the core screamed, alarms blaring, the floor vibrating beneath them. The overload was seconds away. The rising scream of the core rattled the chamber, lights flickering in frantic spasms, conduits splitting open as if the ship itself wanted to tear its heart free. Lyra stumbled through the boiling mist, each breath a sear of pain in her lungs, her ribs aching with every motion. Her body begged her to stop, but her mind refused, forcing her forward through the storm. Behind her, Zeeker's roar carved through the haze, the sound of a predator who had lost sight of his prey and would tear the world apart to find her. The floor shook violently. Warning klaxons howled. Through the static in her earpiece, a voice cracked through, her exo panicked and strained. "Commander, the auxiliary core is overloading. You have to get out of there now." Her throat burned as she tried to answer. Words came broken, raw. "Seal the bulkhead, keep them out. I'll contain it." But even as she spoke, she knew it was a lie. There was no containing this. When the core went, it would rip apart everything around it, including her, including him. Zeeker's silhouette emerged from the mist, massive and unstoppable, his eyes glowing with furious hunger. He moved with terrifying calm, as though the imminent destruction meant nothing, as though her defiance only sharpened his appetite. "You can't escape, Lyra. Not here. Not ever. I will burn with you if I must. But you will remember whose hands closed around you when the light went out." The words crawled into her chest, dragging memories of Calvero's prime with them. She saw herself strapped down again, skin bared to cold air, her breath breaking against restraints she couldn't fight. His shadow looming, his claws tracing her pulse. Each touch meant not just to hurt, but to claim. She had thought she had buried it. But in this moment, with the ship trembling and death seconds away, she felt the same helpless shiver race through her limbs. Her hands clenched into fists. She hated the fear more than him, hated the betrayal of her own body. She screamed, the sound raw and furious, and hurled herself at the nearest panel. Sparks erupted as she ripped open the emergency vent system. If the core detonated, the surge could be directed down, not out. Into the void, not the ship. It would kill her. It might kill him, but it would save the crew. She slammed the override with bleeding hands. Red lights flared. The vents opened with a thunderous crack, pulling the coolant mist, the fire, and the roar of the core into a spiraling cyclone of fury. The chamber howled as atmosphere rushed to escape, dragging everything with it. Zeeker roared, his claws tearing into the deck to anchor himself. Clever little human, always willing to die for the illusion of control. His gaze locked on her, and even as the maelstrom tore at them both, he reached forward. "But I won't let you die. Not yet." She clung to the console, her body battered by the gale, her skin burning from the heat of the core. "Better to die free," she spat, "than live as yours." The core erupted. White fire split the chamber, blinding, consuming. The roar drowned all thought, all sound, all fear. Her body was hurled into the void of light, her scream lost in the explosion. And then silence. When sensation returned, she was weightless, floating. The hum of the ship was gone. The heat of the fire was gone. Only cold, endless dark. Her eyes blinked open slowly, pain throbbing through every bone. She expected death. She expected nothingness. But instead, she saw a faint glow, the shimmer of containment fields holding fragments of the ship together, the last desperate breath of the Resolute systems. She drifted amid debris, her suit torn, blood crusted on her lips. And then she realized she wasn't alone. Zeker floated a few meters away, his body scorched and torn, but alive. His 6 eyes burned through the darkness, fixed on her, unyielding. His voice slithered into her mind again, softer now, almost intimate. You think this is victory? You think you chose death? No, Lyra. You chose me. You carried me through fire. And here we are, together. Alone, as it was meant to be. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She tried to reach for her weapon, but it was gone, torn away in the blast. Her limbs felt heavy, useless. And in the crushing silence of space, she understood the terrible truth. This was his design all along. The battle, the boarding, the chase through the ship. He had driven her here, cut her away from her crew, stripped her down to this moment. No command deck, no soldiers, no weapons. Just him, just her. Her breath fogged her visor. She wanted to scream, to deny him, but no sound carried in the void. He drifted closer, impossibly graceful despite his wounds, until his clawed hand reached toward her, gloved fingers brushing against her helmet. The touch was almost gentle. Almost. Now, little commander, he whispered inside her skull, let us see what you are without control. And in that frozen heartbeat, Lyra realized the most terrifying part wasn't that she might die here. It was that she might not. Lyra's breath came ragged as the chamber doors sealed behind them, the blast of decompression pulling at her hair before the locks hissed tight. The silence that followed felt unnatural, like the vacuum itself had crept into her lungs. She leaned against the steel wall, every muscle trembling from what she had just seen. The swarm of black-armored soldiers, their faceless masks reflecting her own panic back at her, and a single gesture from Darren that had saved her from instant death. His raised hand had halted them, as if he commanded their very heartbeat. She turned toward him now, eyes searching for something. Weakness, explanation, betrayal. But he stood calmly in the low light, stripping the ruined gauntlet from his left arm with measured precision. His skin beneath was scorched and bleeding, but the wound seemed to matter less to him than the fact that she had witnessed his command. You should have let me die, Lyra said, her voice shaking. Darren didn't look at her, not yet. He pulled a hidden injector from his belt, pressed it into the wound, and winced as nanites crawled under his skin to knit flesh. Only then did he meet her gaze, and his eyes were darker than before, carrying a storm that hadn't been there on the battlefield. No, he said simply, because you don't understand. Not yet. Then make me understand, she snapped, pushing off the wall, her fists clenched tight. You control them. You stop them with a gesture. You've been hiding this from me. Who are you? Darren stepped closer, his height casting her in shadow, his presence a pressure she felt in her chest. He lowered his voice, not for secrecy, but for weight. I'm what they fear, Lyra. And one day, you will be too. Her anger wavered, not because of the words, but because of the calm certainty behind them. She wanted to scream, to accuse him of manipulation, but her body betrayed her, heat rising in her skin, her pulse quickening under his nearness. The smell of blood, sweat, and ozone hung in the air, and for a moment the line between fear and desire blurred until she hated herself for even feeling it. But then, memory struck her like a blade. She was 8 again, kneeling in the ruins of her father's workshop after the bombardment. Smoke had stained the walls black, the air choked with metal and ash. She remembered clutching his hand, small fingers wrapped around his charred glove, while his eyes, already glassy with death, stared at the collapsed ceiling. The soldiers who had killed him had walked away without pause, faceless and mechanical in their obedience. They had left her alive, not out of mercy, but because she was beneath notice. That day she had sworn control would be her shield. Never again would she be beneath notice. Never again would she be powerless. And now, here he was, Darren, showing her that control was an illusion, that with one motion he could stop death itself. The very thing she had built her life on, he had just broken apart. Her chest ached, but she refused to let the memory soften her resolve. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. "If you ever control me like you control them," she whispered, her tone low and sharp, "I'll kill you myself." Something flickered in his eyes then. Not amusement, not threat, but something that unsettled her even more. "Respect. You think I saved you to control you?" Darren asked, tilting his head. "No, Lyra. I saved you because you're the only one I can't control." Her heart stumbled at the words, and she hated that it did. She wanted to dismiss it, to call it a lie, but some part of her, the part that had watched an army obey his silent command, knew it might be true. Before she could answer, alarms blared again, shrill and urgent, red lights slicing through the dim chamber. The wall screen flickered alive, showing the orbital station in chaos. Firestorms tore across the docking bay, and boarding craft latched onto the hull like ticks on flesh. The enemy had come faster than expected. "Time's up," Darren muttered, slamming his fist against the wall console. A hidden door hissed open, revealing a narrow corridor leading deeper into the station. Lyra glanced once at the swarm on the display, then back at him. "Where does it lead?" "Not where," he said, grabbing a plasma rifle from the rack inside. "To whom?" She didn't like the sound of that, but she had no choice. The corridor was the only path forward, and every second wasted meant the enemy tightening their hold. She followed, pulse hammering, her mind a storm of questions with no answers. The corridor narrowed, twisting downward like a spine, its walls marked with symbols she didn't recognize. Circles within circles, lines etched in glowing script. Darren moved with certainty, as if the path itself was familiar to him, and that unsettled her most of all. At last they emerged into a vast chamber, humming with power. A colossal sphere hovered above a pool of liquid light, its surface shifting like a living thing. Voices whispered from it. Not words, but something that made her skin crawl, like hearing a language just beyond comprehension. Lyra stopped short, breath stolen by the sight. "What is that?" Darren looked back at her, the glow painting his face in alien silver. "The reason they'll never stop hunting us. The reason humanity still matters." Before she could press further, the liquid light rippled violently, and a figure rose from its depths, tall, robed in shimmering fragments of metal, face hidden beneath a hood. Its voice carried through the chamber, low and resonant. "You brought her," it said, not to Darren, but as if it already knew her name. "The one who believes she controls her fate. She must choose now, or all is lost." Lyra's mouth went dry. She took a step back, every instinct screaming danger, but Darren's hand caught her wrist. Firm, unyielding. "You asked for answers," he said softly, eyes never leaving hers. "Here they are." The hooded figure lifted a hand, and in its palm glowed a shard of crystal, pulsing with a heartbeat that wasn't her own, but somehow resonated inside her chest. "You hold on to control like a weapon," the figure said. "But to survive what comes, you must surrender it." Her body tensed. She thought of her father's lifeless hand, of the years clawing her way into power, of the vow she had made. And yet, here she stood, trembling under the weight of something older, greater, and terrifying. Her voice broke, but she forced the words out. "If I surrender, who am I?" The figure tilted its head, and the whispers from the sphere deepened until the air itself vibrated. "That," it said, "is the question that decides the fate of your species." And before she could move, the chamber shook violently as explosions thundered overhead, the enemy breaching, closing in, and the crystal leapt from the figure's hand, hurtling straight toward her heart. The shard struck her chest with the force of a thunderclap, not piercing flesh, but phasing through her skin as though her body were nothing but light. Lyra gasped, staggering back, her hands clawing at herself as heat spread outward from her sternum. It wasn't pain, it was worse. It was revelation, something tearing open inside her that had been hidden her whole life. Her vision fractured. For an instant, she was no longer in the chamber. She was everywhere. She saw the burning orbital docks, the soldiers swarming like ants, the fleet of alien craft blotting out the stars. She saw deeper still. Ancient wars fought long before Earth's rise, human voices shouting against silence, chains breaking, blood staining foreign soil. And she saw herself, suspended in that vastness, a single thread connecting past and future, fragile yet burning with potential. The voices in her mind whispered in unison. Surrender. Choose. Become. Lyra dropped to her knees, the force of it overwhelming, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. She wanted to rip the crystal out, to claw it from her chest, but there was nothing to tear free. It was inside her now, a part of her. Darren knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. Breathe. You can fight this. Her head snapped toward him, eyes wide, her voice ragged. Fight what? What did you do to me? I didn't do this, he said, his tone hard but not unkind. It was always meant for you. The hooded figure loomed above, its metallic robes rippling as though stirred by unseen currents. The crystal is not a burden, child. It is a key. You were chosen because you believe control was your strength. Now you will learn its cost. Lyra's vision blurred again, memories bleeding into one another. She saw herself as a girl, hiding under shattered beams, swearing she'd never be powerless again. She saw her rise through rebellion ranks, every calculated decision, every ruthless choice to maintain control. And now, all of it stripped bare, revealed as scaffolding for something far more dangerous. Her heart hammered as if it wanted to break free. No, she whispered. I won't surrender. I can't. The chamber trembled as if the sphere itself reacted to her refusal. The whispers grew louder, harsher, until her ears rang. The hooded figure's voice cut through. Then you will doom them all. An explosion ripped overhead, and part of the ceiling collapsed, raining sparks and molten fragments. The enemy was here, breaching through walls, shouts, and weapons echoing down the corridor. The faceless soldiers poured into the chamber, rifles raised, black masks gleaming in the pulsing light. Lyra staggered to her feet, her body still trembling from the shard inside her. But when the soldiers aimed, something in her shifted. She felt it before she understood it. The crystal pulsing in sync with her heartbeat, an invisible current building inside her veins. Without thinking, she raised her hand. The soldiers froze. Their weapons clattered to the floor, their bodies jerking as though strings had been cut. The silence that followed was heavy, unnatural. Lyra stared at her hand, horrified. No, I didn't. Darren's gaze locked on hers, equal parts awe and warning. Now you understand. The hooded figure's voice echoed. Control was your shield, but surrender makes you the blade. Lyra's knees nearly buckled. She wanted to vomit, to deny it, but the truth pressed against her ribs. She had stopped them. Not Darren, not the figure. Her. And then, one of the soldiers twitched. Unlike the others, he moved on his own, mask tilting toward her. His voice rasped through the calm filter, distorted and inhuman. You think you control us now, it said, a guttural echo. But you're already part of us. The others snapped upright, jerking in unison, and Lyra felt the crystal surge violently in her chest. The soldier's eyes, dead lenses, flashed with the same light that now pulsed from her skin. Darren shouted, grabbing her arm. Don't listen. Fight it. Her throat closed, panic surging as the enemy spoke through the body she had frozen. You belong to the hive. You surrender, we consume. You resist, we consume. Either way, humanity ends with you. The sphere above them screamed with energy, the hooded figure raising both arms as if struggling to contain it. She must choose now. Lyra's pulse thundered, sweat dripping down her face, her chest burning with the crystal's relentless rhythm. She felt herself slipping into the current, into them, an ocean pulling her under. Her eyes locked on Darren's, desperate, terrified. Tell me what to do. For the first time since she had met him, Darren hesitated. His jaw clenched, eyes flickering with conflict. Then he said, voice low but sharp as a blade, if you surrender, you might save us. But if you take control, Lyra, you'll damn us all. The soldiers shuddered, the light in their masks flaring brighter, their voices merging into a single, thunderous chorus. Choose. The chamber shook harder, fractures ripping across the floor. Lyra's body trembled violently, the crystal flaring in her chest until it felt like her ribs would split. And then, darkness slammed into her vision, a tidal wave swallowing her whole. When her eyes snapped open again, she was no longer in the chamber. She was standing on the bridge of a starship, alone, staring out at an ocean of stars that flickered like dying embers. And the crystal whispered in her mind, "This is where your choice begins." The bridge was silent, vast windows stretching before her into a horizon of stars that pulsed faintly, as though dying embers scattered across a black ocean. Lyra's reflection stared back at her from the glass, eyes glowing faintly with the same crystalline fire that burned in her chest. She took a step forward, her boots echoing too loudly in the emptiness. "Where am I?" she whispered, but her voice felt swallowed, as though the bridge itself refused to answer. The crystal pulsed in reply, its rhythm threading through her veins. "Future or past? It is both. It is you." Her hands shook. She pressed them to the console in front of her, its surface slick with dust as if it hadn't been touched for centuries. Yet when her fingers made contact, the systems came alive, lights racing across panels, displays flickering awake. The ship recognized her. Screens filled with maps, data streams, fragments of battles long lost. Human war, fleets burning, alien hives consuming world after world, endless cycles of surrender and domination. Lyra's stomach twisted as she saw Earth itself, scorched, broken, oceans boiling away into nothingness. "No," she whispered, clutching the console. "That's not real." But the crystal pulsed again, harder, forcing the truth into her bones. "It is real, unless you choose differently." Her knees buckled, but she steadied herself, refusing to fall. Control. She had always clung to control, even as it slipped like water through her fingers. But here she saw what surrender could mean. Humanity devoured, her species erased. And then she saw something else. Another timeline flickered into view, overlapping the first. Earth alive, scarred but unbroken. Humanity not destroyed, but feared, standing tall. And at the center, her own face, colder, harder, commanding fleets with the same gesture Darren had used to halt the enemy. She felt bile rise in her throat. It wasn't salvation. It was empire. Hers. A voice cut through the ship's hum. Not the crystal. Not her. Something else. "You see it now." Lyra spun, and Darren stood at the far end of the bridge, though she knew. He hadn't been here a moment ago. His eyes glowed faintly like hers. "This isn't real," she said, her voice breaking. "It's more real than the lies you've been clinging to," he said, walking closer. "You asked for control. This is what it means. Humanity survives, but at a cost you can't yet imagine. Or you surrender, and we're consumed. That's the choice." Her fists clenched, tears burning her eyes. "Why me? Why not you?" "Because I already made my choice," Darren said softly. "And it broke me. You're the only one left who can decide." The ship's windows shuddered, stars flickering out one by one until only darkness remained. Lyra gasped, panic surging. The crystal's whispers grew frantic, overlapping voices tearing at her sanity. "Choose. Choose. Choose." Her chest burned, the light searing brighter until she thought it would consume her from the inside out. She screamed, dropping to her knees, and the bridge fractured around her, glass shattering, consoles exploding in sparks. She felt herself falling, weightless, tumbling through void. And then, hands caught her, strong, steady. She looked up into Darren's face again, but now they were back in the chamber, the hooded figure watching, the soldiers still frozen in place. "Did you see it?" Darren asked, urgency in his tone. Her lips trembled. "I saw everything." The hooded figure raised its arms, voice booming over the chaos. "Then decide, child of Earth. Become weapon or become sacrifice. There is no path between." The soldiers convulsed suddenly, breaking free of her grip, their masks blazing with hostile light. Rifles snapped up, aimed at her chest. Lyra's pulse thundered. Control or surrender. Her vow or her undoing. And with tears on her cheeks, the crystal's fire consuming her veins, she opened her mouth to speak. Just as the chamber doors exploded inward, and a towering alien form strode through, its body a mass of black chitin and molten veins, its voice like grinding stone. She chooses nothing. She's already ours. The soldiers fired. And episode 1 ended in fire and light.